Inequalities are kind of a long, fancy way of just saying numbers that aren't exactly equal to one thing, right? A lot of times in math, we'll get something like x equals 5 or y equals 13.2. But with inequalities, we get a range of answers or a range of possibilities that could be represented. I like to use the alligator because I like to say, the alligator, it kind of looks like this symbol, and the mouth of the alligator is going to usually eat what's bigger, right? So when we do this kind of thing, we're looking at a number line. Typically, we use that number line to represent numbers that can go on forever, right? Forever. But we don't have time for that, right? We don't have time to write out all the possibilities. If I say x is greater than 1, you're not going to tell me all the possibilities that x could be, because you would literally do that for the rest of your life and you still wouldn't get done, right? So what we want to do is we use that number line and we highlight what we want to show, okay? If you want to represent an exact number, you're going to use a solid dot or a point. If you want to represent getting right up next to a number without equaling it, you want to use an open dot or an open point, okay? Anything less is to the left, assuming that your number line is going in order and that the left side is going smaller, 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 and the right side is getting bigger, bigger, bigger. Sometimes you need to check that because it's not always true, depending on how you set up your number line. Anything more is going to be to the right. Okay, so less to the left, more to the right. Sometimes we highlight between or outside of points too, because we can represent amounts of numbers that are between two numbers or outside of those two numbers on a number line. So let's look at some examples. All right, so if I say here, x is greater than 2, all I want to do is say, okay, x is not equal to. If it had that little symbol of that line, it's almost like a piece of an equal sign, right? And it's not exactly equal to 2. That's not going to equal to, but it's going to come right up next to it, okay? X is less than 2, okay? The smaller part of the symbol is touching the x, so x is less than 2. So think about on the number line, less is to the left. So if we say, okay, x is not going to be 2, so I'm going to do an open dot, an open circle, because maybe it's 1.999999, okay? But if I go right up next to it and it's going to be everything to the left, we're going to represent that inequality in this way. And that's x is less than 2. I don't have to list everything for the rest of my life, right? Okay, then on this one, x is going to be greater than or equal to -1. So if it's equal to, I'm going to put a solid dot at my -1, because it could land right on that -1. And x is greater than my -1. So it's going to be everything bigger than, and that's how we represent that on this number line. Now, we could have an example like this one where, look, these numbers are not necessarily in order, so be careful. Sometimes the bigger number is going to be on the left, okay? Sometimes it's going to be on the right. So we just have to really pay attention to what that looks like, because when we do negatives, it can throw us off. Okay, so if I say x is going to be bigger than -6 and smaller than -3, I know that it's not equal to those, so I'm going to do open values, open dots, and x is going to be between them, okay? X is represented between those two numbers. On this one, you have to be careful. The bigger number was on the left, like I said, you have to watch out for that. If we imagine that, x is going to be between that 10 and the 14, right? And it's also going to equal them potentially. So we can do a solid dot at 10 and a solid dot at 14. And x is going to be smaller than the 14 or bigger than the 10. Either way, you can see what that looks like. And finally, another example where you have kind of an or, either or, is x is going to be greater than 103. So if I do an open circle, it could be bigger than 103. It could also be less than, but not equal to, 100 in this example.